So Kozzie Pickett for me is where the buck stops, and we're talking about appreciating what we're watching. I went the game on Saturday night, and to see this young fella run around and do what he did, I actually made the comment in the call, they're not paying him enough. Like, he was exceptional, and it was like a young kid mucking around in the playground, just showing you what he's got. So he takes that mark, he kicks a goal around the corner. I think this is the third quarter. Kicks a 45-metre snap literally off half a step. He didn't take 2 steps. It was like half a step. The connection was clean and pure. It curled around the near goal post. It was a work of art. Then 5 or 6 minutes later, he takes a mark on the boundary line on the opposite side and does the same thing with a check side or a banana kick, and just knew it was a goal before, as it came off the boot, celebrating. And I reckon about 3 or 4 minutes after that, he had the ball in the middle of the ground, or in the middle of the 50, 45 metres out. He had a Carlton player who was sort of trying to stop him from being able to get on his left or right foot. Ended up presenting right in front of him. And I haven't gone back and had a look at the vision. I haven't seen the slow-mo. I haven't seen a replay of it. But he dead set nutmegged this bloke to try and kick the goal through his legs from 45 metres and missed it by a foot.
Yep.
He was exceptional in what he was doing. I mean, to kick 5 goals, have another 23 disposals. He's had 3 or 4 games like that this year. He is a tool that can be used. Like, he's going to be a match winner for as long as he's in the game, and as long as he's motivated to test his skills against the opposition of the day, and sort of motivated to understand how important his role is going to be, not just in the high end stuff, but in the bricks and mortar underneath for the team to be able to play their best footy. So the Demons have a winner.
The buck stops. The sheer appreciation of the excellence of Kozzie Pickett. The buck stops. Looking for a career that gives you more. Search Police Careers. Victoria Police, made for more. The big issue was yesterday at the MCG. Fremantle plants its flag against Collingwood. You were there. Did you enjoy it?
It was a great game. Yeah, I thought it was a high pressure game. I thought both sides played really good footy. Collingwood were clearly the better team for the most of the day, and they owned field position. They were probably slicker and cleaner to be able to get the ball into their forward line, but that's where Fremantle held up. Their defensive 50, their back 6 or 7 held up. And if you go through these names, Brennan Cox, who's a good intercept player, but has at times been vulnerable when the ball hits the ground. Oscar McDonald, who's been a journeyman at best. Luke Ryan, who's an All-Australian quality defender. Chapman, who's a young player who's coming and does the job really well. Warner, who was subbed out ultimately. Jordan Clark, who is having an exceptional season. And watching him live, I mean, I've seen him a lot this year, but watching him live, he showed a real, resilience underneath his performance because there was a weight of possession coming up against him. And Bailey Banfield, who has also been a plug-and-play player who's been on the cusp for his entire career. So there's your back 7. It's not jumping off the page as they're going to stand up against 60 inside 50s from the best team in the competition and be able to handle it. But they not only did they withstand that, but they got tackled 35 times in their own defensive 50 and didn't wilt. The ball didn't spill out. They didn't lose their nerve. They still tried to move the ball and get it out of the danger area, or they took the tackle and drew a stoppage, and they were able to absorb that pressure for long enough to give themselves a chance to go and win the game in the last quarter. I thought it was exceptional. Nick Dacos and Josh Dacos swapping between our back flank and middle, which begs the question, do you want your users off the back or do you want them rotating forward? That's probably a question for the Collingwood match committee. It was an easy decision given Josh's last quarter the week before. And how can we get Josh involved more in the midfield and still not lose him off halfback? Well, we'll do it with his brother. They had 70 touches between them, and you can't say that they weren't effective. But There was plenty that came out of that game.
So for Fremantle, how big a result purely for them? That's 8 out of 9. They have the best record against the top 9 teams at 6-2. And that's Collingwood at the MCG ticked off the list.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's on the MCG makes it even, and it's Collingwood. I think that's tick. Then I don't think Voss is going to kick 6 goals against Collingwood next time. I don't think that's always, but I think even the tactics of that was excellent. Get Darcy Moore as deep as you can, and then and use his direct opponent when he hits up at the ball. If Darcy has an Achilles heel, that's it. And I think that was coaching. And it was definitely Voss was definitely trying to go to Darcy Moore, but I think getting him on the hit up was something that Freo looked for, and he kicked 3 goals. Probably should have kicked 4 in the first quarter off the back of that. But yeah, Fremantle would be. Look, I just think that there hasn't been a lot of big calls made off the back. I haven't really heard a lot of big calls have been made off the back of this weekend. I think that what we sort of often find is some of the big calls that are made throughout the year are debunked as the season continues. Fremantle's last 8 weeks have been exceptional. They lose one, and you think, okay, well, let's revert back to the old narrative. So I think that they're in really good shape. Brayshaw was a little bit quiet, but Sarong, they tried to tag with Warner through the midfield, and there's still got role players that are different places that are doing a really good job. They seem to be connected. We can argue about their style of game as much as you like, but I think that they're going to be hard to beat if they execute and implement their game plan well.
So the coach in the aftermath spoke about shedding the safe aspect of the game when they're chasing it. You can do that at 22 points down. And there's the characteristic moment, which will be the Banfield kick into the middle for Young, who, whether intentionally or not, gets it to Jackson and he kicks the goal from outside.
That was a great kick. So there's elements in that. So kicked 4 goals, 2 in the last quarter. All 6 of those scores emanated from back half. 1 of them from their D50, 5 of them from their half-back line. The Banfield kick to Young, we're all looking at, okay, they've opened it up and they've tried to go faster. There's no doubt that they had to put some more speed on the game than they had to in the past, but Collingwood's defence broke down for the first time that we've seen for a while. That for Young to be sitting in that part of the ground and for that kick to be able to hit is not something Collingwood normally allow. So they will look at that in review and they'll go, well, we missed an opportunity because we're normally cutting that off and going back and scoring from that. And then the decision doesn't look that good. So you can't hit a target that's not there. You can't complete a kick into a dangerous part of the ground uncontested if the defence didn't allow it. So there's a little bit of an aspect of that. The other one that was a significant difference was Hayden Young's impact. So he had 7 touches. He was the second ranked player on the field in that last quarter, 3 inside 50s, 4 score involvements of those 6. Had a profound impact on the game. So begs the question, who's the player that Freo can least do without? Maybe it's been a player that hasn't been there. And if he can stand up and have a couple of months of really great football, maybe he is the difference between where they've been and where they want to be.
Collingwood had a 10-point lead on the comp a couple of weeks ago. It's now back to 2. They've lost 2 close games. I find myself, I watch those games now expecting them to win, and it's a surprise when they don't. Any concerns for Collingwood to your eye?
No, not really. I mean, I think Brody Mychek hit the post a couple of times. They would love the field position that they got. They win contested ball by 20. They win the tackle count by 21. Inside 50s by 23. There's not a lot wrong with your game when you're doing that. Gold Coast had more inside 50s than Adelaide. They got whopped. So, it's not all, and we'll talk about it later. The Giants kept giving inside 50s to their opposition, but whether that's a rope-a-dope or not, so Collingwood's game is in good shape. that back seven of Freo were just able to withstand the Collingwood onslaught. They didn't let them connect, and then when they hit ground level, the Collingwood pressure came, but they didn't wilt. But no, I wouldn't be that worried. I wouldn't be worried at all if you're Collingwood. I did say about a month ago, I think, the gap between Collingwood and the next won't be as big as everyone thinks it is.
Yep.
And there's still a lot of football to play. So looking forward to what that shows.
Nathan Buckley, you are on duty, so that the immediate instincts when this happens, and some cold reflection in the aftermath. How do you see it?
So it was assigned careless, high, and severe. Is that right?
Yes.
And when he clearly had high contact, had to be severe because he was concussed, and the careless element speaks to the intention, right? Or what would a reasonable player do in those circumstances?
Yes, the failure to meet the duty of care.
So that's what will be prosecuted. So it'll be very similar to the Alex Pearce case. The first thing that I think is all right, so process. I think what the decision highlights, and I think we've seen this a few times, I think Michael Christian as the MRO officer has actually handballed some of these cases, the ones that are on the fine line, the ones that are asking players to adapt and to change the way they approach a contest off the back of the outcome. Like, so if the outcome's poor or not what we want to remove from the game, which is concussion incidents, then we go back and look at, all right, so what happened in the lead up to that a player should be accountable for. The very same incident without the outcome isn't challenged and isn't questioned. So there's a discrepancy in that as it stands. So it's all about the outcome and not about the manner or the action.
Yeah, I would dispute that. We've had 5 recent concussions that haven't resulted in any charges.
Right.
So that tells you that it's not just the outcome.
So
you still have to be culpable to a degree. So there still has to be a level of carelessness, rather than we've had 5 recent that's just an accident.
And do you think so? This needs pass
to be tested.
Accident.
This needs to be tested.
Right, okay.
So Alex Pearce ended up being an accident, but it was initially charged, and he was given a 3-week suspension. There's a slight differentiation here. This hasn't had a week number attached to it.
The Ben King one from a couple of weeks ago with Lockie Whitfield.
Yep, no charge.
No, so that didn't go up.
That's right.
So
there was no reportable offence in that. It was just a pure accident.
Well, some would suggest that Ben King didn't make the ball his primary focus and didn't get down low enough to go and win the ball, and that there was contact with Whitfield was part of his thought process. I've got no doubt, and this could hang him, I've got no doubt that there was part of Stephen May's thought process that said, I want to win this footy, but if I don't win it, I need to stop Evans from getting the other side of me as a defender. That's my job. I can't let him go aside and give him a clean run at the ball. I would suspect, without being in his mind, and made this call in commentary, I think along with Tom Lynch, I think Stephen May is one of the older style footballers that would sense and seize an opportunity to be physically intimidating on the opposition. So I think that's all part of it, but that's supposition. What would a reasonable player do in that moment? I don't think any of his actions are unreasonable. I think he went to win the football. The football checked and came back up towards Evans in the last bounce, and that'll be presented by Melbourne. And the question will be asked, what do you expect him to do? Not to go and compete for the football. And the tribunal have to decide whether it was fair, whether it was careless for Stephen May to assume that he could go and compete to win the football in that instance.
So he will, like Alex Pearce did, he will have to prove that he thought he could win the football, that he was going to arrive at the football and not be second to it.
And the difference in that case is Alex Pearce is looking at a ball in the air and the player's on the ground. So there's a big differentiation between where the player coming back onto the ball and where the ball was. This one, the player and the ball are in the same sort of frame of perception for Stephen May.
Do you think May thought he was legitimately going to win the ball?
Yeah.
Yep. So he'll have to be steadfast on
The
that.
AFL will say that he didn't reach out with his hands to go and to go and get his hands on the football first. That he actually was that he actually kept his elbows, in by his hips and was thinking that he was going to take it through with his chest. That's not necessarily a technique that is normal.
And what was he doing with his arm at the moment of impact? So Pearce was able to he didn't brace or flinch, or he just sort of left his arm hanging where it was. And I felt at the time that he minimised the impact as absolute best he could in that moment of impact.
Well,
did May do the same, or did May?
Well,
brace?
big brother, little brother fights, and the big brother sort of walks through the space with swinging his arms around. He goes, "If you come in here, then you're actually I'm not hitting you. You're in the way."
Yes,
that's pretty much how Stephen May approached that contest.
Okay,
he was going through like a freight train, and he was trying to bodyline the ball. Like you talk about bodyline the ball, so between your shoulders. That was pretty much the angle that he was taking towards the football. But then when it checked, it was actually on his right shoulder. Evans took the ball, checked back and checked up, and then took the ball, and that's why the right hand side of Stephen May's body was probably in line with the middle of Evans's body. So, look, I can make arguments both ways. I think that was a legitimate football act. I think I think to try and prove that he wasn't trying to win the football is going to be very difficult to do. And I believe personally, to prove careless, you have to prove that he wasn't trying to win the footy. I don't know how that can be done.
So the two final arbitrations here is: if you were on the jury, would you find him guilty or not guilty?
That's a real good question. I think on the balance of it, there's enough doubt that you wouldn't be able to convict, that you wouldn't be able to suspend him.
And in the way that the game has been going and measuring recent cases, what do you think will happen?
I think that he'll get off.
Yep.
I think that he'll get off. I think the Alex Pearce, Ben King precedents, not that precedents are looked at, but I think there's not enough evidence to suggest that was careless, in my mind.
Yep, he'll definitely be able to use the Alex Pearce case.
Yeah.
Having been,
what's your thoughts?
My gut feeling is he'll beat it. But it absolutely belongs at the tribunal to be tested, and it will swing entirely on his evidence. So Alex Pearce was unflinching in his evidence, and he was able to explain, consistent with the vision, what he was doing, and that will now fall to Stephen May. So if he's making it up, he will be suspended. If he's able to marry his state of mind with what the vision shows, I think he would be not guilty.
My question that would need to be answered is what are his alternatives? What do we actually expect a player, not Stephen May, but a player in that position? What do we expect Evans to do? Were Evans's actions absolutely what we expect a player to do in that point? Because he didn't back down, he didn't slow down, but the fact was in that split second he did get to the ball. So if you've got two players that are coming from opposite sides, 180 degrees apart, and they both think they can get to the ball first, is that okay? Because one might and one might not.
Yeah, it is okay if it was legitimate that May felt he could get to the ball first, as opposed to he's pretending he could get to the ball first and he's happy to take body.
Yeah, no, I think we nearly need an angle that's perpendicular to, but because what we're seeing is one that's slightly on the side there, where Evans and May are sort of nearly sort of behind the camera angle that we've seen. You need one sort of perpendicular. I think there is one that showed that the ball checked and bounced back up.
I agree with that.
After it had been rolling forward. So I
I
would
think
be
on
using
approach, there's a very real chance that the ball's going to end up with May.
Correct.
Which was so Pearce relied on that he was going to make the contest. If
Mm.
you know you're going to be second, then you have to exercise a duty of care. If you believe you're arriving simultaneously, then it's a different consideration.
See, in my gut, as I said about Steve, the player like May, who's a physical player, I still feel like there was, okay, I'm going to win this, but if I don't win it, I will make contact.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you prove that.
Yeah.
I don't know how you prove it.
I feel like we should do PFI, Adelaide Landon PFI. This was just a straight out demolition. And it was a bit, so I'd been away when the Suns beat Collingwood, and you go, kudos to them. And then you sit down to watch the Suns and you go, oh, what the hell is this? And Damien Hardwick was a bit the same. It was the intercept marks early, so they played straight into Adelaide's hands, and they got absolutely torched. And the scoring power of Adelaide is we are well used to, but it's pretty awesome in those circumstances.
Yeah, they've come together as a team. Like, they only had 8 wins last year for the entire season. They finished 15th. So I think their PFI has been taking place gradually and slowly. They jumped into the year really quickly. They've had better availability than the last couple of seasons. They were playing some really good footy 2 years back, 3 years back. I thought they were a top 8 prospect for a long time in those couple of years, 22, 23, and they've added to that. Peatling's doing a job. Cummings is playing really good footy. And Neil Bullen probably had his best game for the club, but his worst games are 7 out of 10s and his best games are 8.5s. Like, he's just metronomic in the way that he goes about it. So you've got 3 players that are experienced players that have cut their teeth, that have done the hard yards, and now they get a chance to find out how good they can be. They found Thilthorpe's fit and up and about. Walker's held on. They're damaging there. Rankin's come in, looks dangerous and damaging, can win a game in 10 minutes if he needs to. Jordan Dawson is the inspirational leader that every locker room needs, and they love him and they believe in him and they buy into him. And then you've got their back six hasn't been stable. Michelini's coming. Worrell's been great. Butts and Murray and Borlays keep rotating in and out. So they've had to Keane, and they've had to find and adjust to that. But they've just been able to do it well enough. Haven't even mentioned Saligo, Keys. Like they feel like, I think I said about them or of them at the beginning of last year or even the year before. They're a team of no names that are going to become names. Like they've got a group of young players here that when they get the mix right and when they build the belief around themselves, they were a bit poor bugger me for a little while there when they didn't quite take their chances. Yep. There's no poor bugger me about Adelaide at the moment.
That they've got their eyes on a top 4 finish now. They could actually finish top.
They could.
Here.
Well, in the
scenario.
If we're looking in integrity, well, just look at their last 2 weeks. So we were talking about a top 9. So you've got to win the games that you expected to win, and it's dependent on draw and all of this. But ultimately, are you going to beat the teams that you're competing with for top 2, top 4, top 8? That's because they're and even above top 8, it's like, okay, fifth and 6th, we got to get a home final in those elimination games. So there's every game counts. So they've gone and beaten the Bulldogs, and really in the vision that I saw from that, the highlights I saw from that, they controlled that game for the large part. It was a lot greater than the 2-goal margin that ended up. And then they've absolutely smashed the Suns at home. So there's 2 really strong performances. Fremantle have done the same the last 2 weeks. Beat Hawthorn, then beat Collingwood. Bulldogs are on the other way. Adelaide and Brisbane, they've been beaten by. So these are the time. They're 8-point games. You're either there or you're not. And Adelaide have proven that they're ready to beat the better teams in the competition, and they're going to have plenty of opportunity in the next couple of months.
And the Suns, can that destabilise things?
Yeah, absolutely. But the way the coach framed it is exactly the way that you need to frame it. It's the only way you can frame it. You can't say that's us.
Yes.
because that's planting the seed that you don't want to see that germinate at all. But everyone gets kicked in the nuts, and like we just got kicked in the nuts, and I think that's fair enough. So that's a mulligan. And we spoke about this. So does every team get a mulligan? Well, I don't know how many. Like you can get one early in the year or in the first half of the year. You don't really want to be having them late in the year because it does show a soft underbelly that could be exposed when the pressure comes. So the Suns could still play really good footy in the next 5-6 games. They've got another one, but when they're under the cosh and the pressure really comes, this game's still going to be there. They're going to have to do a bit of work between now and finals, if that happens, to purge this result out of their psyche.
The pressure index is the Bulldogs. So Byron Bay Bulldogs posed the question to you, Bucks. Have the Bulldogs been unlucky facing the two hottest teams 2 weeks in a row? Technically, they could have won both. Effort and coaching not a problem, or is it? Because the technically they could have won both is technically they could have been beaten in both games by a lot more. They're 1-8 against the teams that matter, and they're in 9th place on the outside looking in.
Yeah, the margins have been close on the scoreboard, but they've just held in, haven't they? They haven't really looked a winning chance in either of them, to be honest. And I think when you're talking about a margin, so it's two goal margins, and you say, well, we're not that far away, but I think they're plucky, and you generally say that teams are plucky when they're not quite as good as the opposition, but they give a good account of themselves. And I think that describes the Western Bulldogs pretty well. I think their top end, their back third is where the issues are. Their midfield stacked. I think their forward line competes really hard and has got a lot of hurt factor. They've been rotating players through the back 6 or 7 to see, especially in the tall, in the key position areas, to see if they can, I suppose, hold up better against the better sides, and they're yet to be able to find that. Maybe Liam Jones coming back. I've thought all along that Liam Jones would come back in. He probably showed that he's not quite up to speed off the back of the weekend, but he'll get another couple, and it'll be whether that was a getting back up to speed or whether he can't. But I think that was a decision that needed to be made because the alternatives weren't going to get it done. So I think Bevo is shuffling all of the deck chairs that he can. I think the Dogs have played pretty much as well as they could with the constituents at their disposal. And we might be seeing them sort of hit the ceiling at the moment.
The pressure index for New Vision Clinic's Keyhole Laser Vision New Generation Technology. So I thought they were going to be better than this, but there's now a mountain of evidence to say that's not the case.
And do you think that your thought of them being better was the wrong thought, or do you think that they've fallen short of where they should be?
Yeah, I think they've fallen short.
Where? Because they had so Cleary, O'Donnell, Garcia, Davidson, who's been excellent, and I think will be and O'Donnell, who I think will be a very good player, McNeil, who plays his role well, Poulter, Sanders, and Fraser. Always get that one wrong. Those two are they're in their second years and going to be very good players, but they're still in their second years. And then Bramble, who's been favoured and has played a lot of pretty good footy, but they're guys that you say, okay, well, would they? How many of those would be getting games in the top 4 sides at the moment? And maybe half of them, maybe a third of them. So they're carrying sort of 4 or 5 players and have consistently rotated, and as all sides do, looking for a bottom 5 that are going to be really strong role players against the best. And what this season has proven is they can be really strong role players against the bottom half of the ladder, but when it comes up against the top half of the ladder, they're not quite there yet. So are we surprised by that? Do we expect more than that?
So yes, and that's the conundrum, I think. The way you have perfectly articulated that. Their list still has a tail. The idea that the finished product is not right. but they have added pieces. And so they've added valuable pieces. The progression of Fraser, the addition of Davidson and Sanders should have lifted the bottom.
Well,
the top
we
end
look
is
at
there.
Davidson now. We look at Davidson now, but like 6 months ago, we didn't know that.
No.
They found one.
So and when you find three who are better than what you had, so I guess stylistically they worry me. So they're heavy scoring, but they can't defend.
And you're spot on. Oh, the irony is their injuries, or the ones that are out, aren't going to make them any better.
No.
You bring Ugle-Hagan in, it's not going to make them any better. You bring Treloar in, it's not going to make them any better.
They've got no trouble scoring.
So the front two-thirds are fine. And this has always been the way with Luke Beveridge coached backlines. If they will always position the ball, and they are aggressive at intercept marking. So if you want to set up with a couple of tools that are going to at least bring the ball to ground, if you kick a ball 30 metres out from your goal into a Western Bulldogs defence, you're going to give yourself a chance at ground level, because they're going to come from everywhere to try and mark that footy. And they'll absolutely commit. 3 or 4 of them will commit to an aerial contest and give up whatever is happening. And you can nearly, there's all coaches have got philosophies that they have that work for them 8 out of 10, but they can be an Achilles heel. And the dogs are a little bit there at the moment.
The curiosity, you've been fascinated by the Giants' field position all year, and even though they're getting hot, that hasn't rectified.
No, it hasn't. And so they are 17th for allowing inside 50s against in the whole competition. And it's not as if we're just looking at 4 rounds or 8 rounds. This is a body of work against all teams. And they are 17th. Only West Coast Eagles have allowed the opposition to get their ball into their D50 more than the Giants at 57.8. So it's like a half an inside 50 a week. The other top 9 sides, so the other 8 sides are all in the top 9 at being able to defend, field position. So in the last 6 weeks, back in round 14. GWS beat Brisbane by 11 points. They allowed 55 insides and lost that count. In round 15, they beat the Suns by 7 points. They allowed 68 inside 50s and lost that count by 20. In round 18 against Geelong, they beat Geelong by 26 points. They allowed 60 inside 50s and lost that count by 4. And, so they're against 3 teams that they're going to face, that they may well face in finals. And we see this same pattern, but they still win the game. So, and then on the weekend, they just did what they had to do against it's a side that looked like, due to injury, etc., that they were in a different weight division, 48 points, but they still allowed 57 inside 50s to Essendon, 4 more than they actually were able to produce themselves. So. What does that mean? That it's not important?
Why is it so?
It's like my gut is that when you get into a semi-final or a prelim or a granny, that you need to win. If the ball spends that much time within one possession of your opposition goals, where you're going to make errors. There's going to be, there's so marginal those games, and they could be arm wrestles. Something's going on in their team D that's allowing the opposition to get in it. And unless they're deliberately rolling back, roping a dope and wanting to springboard off that. But I haven't seen enough evidence that that's been done consistently enough. But you can't argue with what they're putting forward. They're beating good teams with a weight of possession against, losing territory, allowing the ball inside their D50 and then just holding up. I mean, we saw it with Fremantle and Collingwood on the weekend, but it maybe the midfield game, they don't care for it as much. Maybe they feel like it's better to turn the ball over a little bit further from their goals, which gives them more space to springboard back in. Maybe they are really happy to hold their front 4 in particular, their front 4 forwards, and not involve them in team defence, which they don't, because they've got Jones, Daniels, O'Halloran, to name a couple, that will do the work as high forwards to go and support their midfield or support their back six and then be involved in springboard, going back to a really damaging sort of front four, Cadman, Hogan, Green, Stringer at the moment. So, it's a different way of doing it. Although Kingsley did say on the weekend, like, we didn't like a lot of what we did tonight. And maybe, I don't know if that's around field position, but it's fascinating. Like, it gives Finn Callaghan more room to run, and I think he's been exceptional. But I can't explain it, and I just can't help but feel that that's something that they want to rectify, or they'll be vulnerable when you get to September.
A win at last for Carlton, Patrick Cripps in the aftermath on Fox Footy there. So this was your game, Bucks. Is the unanswerable question is, what did it all mean? It helped that they played the season's other most disappointing team.
Yeah, well, I think that there's still so much to play for both teams. 6-win seasons, going into that game, their worm, the position on the ladder worm sort of married up, started disappointing, and then, it would have been clubs that were both looking at top four prospects. They definitely were bandied around in that position, but really disappointing seasons. But there's so much to play for. Like, there's so much to play for their coaches. There's so much to play for their clubs, for their teams, and the information that's going to be gathered in the next 5 or 6 weeks is important to make the right decisions. So, having been in that position, you strip it back and you go, okay, what are we going to achieve? What do we need to do in this next 6 weeks to allow this club, this team, to find out about itself so that we're in a better space to contend next year? And it's a really altruistic thing to do, because it might not be me that's there as a senior coach, or we won't be whole as a group. We know that, but let's just enjoy the moments and have gratitude for what we're a part of. That's what both clubs go in with that. Carlton's performance was excellent. So Paddy Cripps spoke about then, we go back to what we know, pressure around the ball, and that's exactly what we saw. From the start, from the first siren to the last, they were well structured around the ground, prevented Melbourne from being able to find chains of marks, forced them long down the line, and then when Melbourne wanted to run and carry, Carlton's pressure was excellent continually. Kozzie Pickett did get out the back a few times, but outside of that, their defensive aspects were great. Charlie Curnow coming up the field and their rucks running forward, Max going forward. That worked really well. Curnow had 15 touches, all of them kicks, mind you. He's definitely not a run and carry player. He's not going to find time and space with that. Moya was excellent. Young Carroll was very good. They were up and about. They were invested and they were in charge. So and Paddy Cripps himself, it wasn't an accumulators game, but he and Clayton Oliver in his 200th, they went head to head, and that was a fascinating contest in itself. And Cripps took the chocolates with that one, 29 touches ultimately in the end, and showed us the type of player that he is. He was probably best on ground.
All right, what does it all mean? We won't know for some time. What they got wrong, good for you, good for the planet. Smartlight environmental exit signs. The Eagles starting favourite, as I flagged this on the way in. Worst horse in the race, can't be running favourite. And Buckley's chance, Richmond have won 5 games. Salute to the Tigers.
Yeah, well, they only had the 2 last year, and there was a lot of talk about can they win a game, and I was fearful. I was fearful around their tall stocks, both in front and behind the ball, and they've got a plethora of players that have rotated through both the key back and key forward stocks. But they're finding a couple. I think they're having a crack. They're young defenders. Miller in particular has probably continued. I like Gray. He hasn't played a lot of footy yet, but I think he's on the list and will come through. Jonty Fall looked really good. So there's shoots. There's green shoots. We speak about it a fair bit, but I think they've been relatively consistent in the way they've gone about it, and they've won some games that we didn't expect them to win, but it was good for them to go and win a game that some would have expected them to
Yep.
win.
And the
that was
third
a good
quarter was
performance.
electrifying. And it does mean when the sums are all done at the end of the year and you go, was it a good year? Richmond are going to be able to answer convincingly yes. And unfortunately, West Coast, no. No.
Well, both of these games that we're talking about, so Melbourne's, the query would be on why didn't we turn it? Why weren't we able to perform? Their run and carry against Carlton's pressure was impotent. They weren't able to put chains of handball together, and they're trying to play that way. West Coast just have a dearth of leadership. It looks like they have Andrew McGualter's job is so difficult because the leadership in the locker room has been proven over the last couple of years to not be able to set a standard for the young players to come through on. So Harley Reid's development is a shadow on what it could be, because he's probably been left to his own devices. That statement isn't correct. He hasn't been left to his own devices, but the imposition of standards probably isn't at the level that would maximise his development. And he's just one of a dozen of those young players that really need that right now. So where's it going to come from?
Nathan Buckley. We've both had a week off doing our seedings, so we get to reorder.
Have a newcomer that slipped into the 4th seed, and that's Adelaide. And I think that they've done it off the back of being able to take a few scalps out of that top 9, and they're going to have a few more opportunities. The Collingwood game, a couple of weeks out from the middle of August, is going to be instructive. But they've done plenty right to this point. So that's the first time that I've had them in my top 4. I've got Geelong at 3, Brisbane at 2, and Collingwood at 1. So I've left out the Giants and I've left out Hawthorn. Freo have still got a bit to do, despite their best win of the season.
Yes. I wondered whether to put Fremantle at 4. They've beaten Hawthorn and Collingwood in consecutive weeks.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't.
Why not? I will.
Oh, well done.
I will. I'll put them at 4. I got Adelaide at 3. They are new to my seedings as well, but I think they sit at 3. The forecasting on them is blue sky. 2 Brisbane, 1 Collingwood. I could have that either way at the moment. Collingwood, Brisbane, Brisbane, Collingwood. I think it's a bit flip of the coin.
Yeah, it's not as clear and cut and dried as it might have been a month ago. Cats, man, you
just outside at the moment. Yeah, a bit of tough love.
Just make them earn a bit of your love.
Yeah, I like that. And we mightn't know till the first week of the finals with them, but they need to take care of some business.
But they're not going to be challenged until we get there. I mean, obviously you are going to be challenged, but
the Sydney game looms for them.
The last 3 weeks since the bye, they haven't hit it out of the park.
Not
They've
really.
just sort of been middling.